A couple of months ago, we gave you a sneak peek of what Subaru's coming out with this year. And now, we finally get some time behind the wheel in what might be Subaru's most important vehicle going forward. This is the 2025 Forester Hybrid. Before we get into this review, do us a favor, hit those like and subscribe buttons below to get all of our latest content. Personally, as far as styling goes, I like the way it looks, even though in the mirrors, it looks like a fun-sized Ford Explorer. But that's not all that bad since it has kind of a nice broad-shouldered husky look. There's not a whole lot to distinguish this hybrid from the standard Forester, but there are some slight touches here and there, like a few emblems on the side and in the back. All Forester models come standard with all-wheel drive, as designated by this badge here, and this black two-tone roof is available on the top trim. Under the hood of the new Forester Hybrid is a parallel hybrid system that's paired with a 2.5-liter Boxer 4-cylinder. It also has two electric motors in the transmission that are fed by a 1.1 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. As I mentioned earlier, all-wheel drive is standard on all Forester models, but this hybrid differs from other hybrid all-wheel drive systems in that it has a physical coupling and a drive shaft that sends the power backwards rather than having separate electric motors just for the rear wheels. That comes in handy when you're off-roading, and we'll get to that in a bit. Combined system power is 194 horsepower, and it's all fed through a continuously variable transmission with 6 simulated gear shifts. Altogether, that's just slightly more than the 180 horsepower that the standard Forester produces. From behind the wheel, acceleration is pretty decent. You're not getting a huge punch of forward motion initially, but it sounds slower than it actually is. I don't know if that makes sense, but let me try to explain. This has a continuously variable transmission, which means it doesn't really shift like a normal transmission. It just kind of hangs those revs out, so kind of moves like a wounded cow sometimes. But you are actually gathering speed. It's just that weird kind of audible thing that makes you feel like you're not really moving that much because it sounds like the engine's laboring. As far as overall acceleration, it's good enough to get onto a freeway without having to stress about anything and actually not even have to floor it. When you're passing slower traffic, again, it feels slower than it is, but you might have to plan a little bit further in advance to pass like a long semi-truck. As a hybrid, one of the bigger concerns is how the brake feels. You don't want a definite transition between the brake regeneration, where you're recharging the battery, and when you're using the actual pads. Now with this, it really does feel like a standard non-hybrid car. There's no hint of that transition there. Subarus are generally known for handling pretty well, and in this case, it holds true. It tracks really nicely through these turns, doesn't have a lot of body roll, but I do notice that the ride is a little bit on the stiff side, maybe even a little stiffer than something like a Mazda CX-50. So when you hit some of the moderate undulations in the road, you do get a little more jostling. In general though, the ride quality is pretty good. You'll still feel a lot of the ruts and bumps in the road, but they're not going to be intrusive. One thing I do notice, and it's mostly because we're not using the radio or listening to a podcast, I'm hearing a little more road noise than I'm used to, and then when you hit a bump in the road, it sends kind of a dull thud through the cabin as well. Almost like some of the EVs out there where they don't have quite as much sound deadening to take care of all of that. In general, once you turn on the radio, you probably won't hear much of that. Subarus are also known for having a very complete suite of advanced safety features in their EyeSight system. And this is the fully loaded model, so it has everything, and it works really well. The adaptive cruise control keeps the speed nice and constant, and when someone cuts into your lane or moves out of your lane, it responds with really smooth controls. It doesn't jump on the brakes unless someone really swipes in on you, and when it clears out, it doesn't get on the throttle too hard either. It just kind of smoothly eases you in and out. And honestly, I didn't realize I was in adaptive cruise control for a while because it was so smooth. One thing I'm particularly pleased with this Forester though is the visibility. This roof pillar here is really thin in my sight lines, and I really like that in pretty much any car. Nowadays, they're packing all sorts of electronics and airbags in there, making it thicker and thicker. But in this, I don't have to bob my head back and forth to see through turns at all. I just really have a nice view through it. The view out the back, it's about what you'd expect from a compact SUV, but maybe a little bit better because the window is a little wider. If you happen to load the cargo space all the way to the roof, at least in this top trim level, we have a digital rear view mirror. I generally don't like them because I don't have any depth perception. You don't use binocular vision when you're using one of these virtual mirrors. But then again, if you are loaded to the top, it's better than nothing. Well, there's one way that Subaru sets itself apart from other SUV makers, and that's with its off-road capabilities. Now, Subarus are already known for being great in the snow and rain, which is why they're so popular in the Northeast and Pacific Northwest. But the off-road side of it, it's pretty stout compared to, let's say, the regular SUVs in its class like the CR-V or RAV4. Primarily because, as a hybrid, this doesn't have the typical hybrid all-wheel drive system where they have an electric motor powering the rear wheels. Instead, this has an actual drive shaft from the transmission to the back. Having that mechanical connection gives you a little more off-road abilities, especially when it comes to traction. Another helper when you're off-roading is Subaru's X mode. Now you have a few different programs here, one for snow and dirt and mud. And right now we're in the snow and dirt mode, and the hill descent control is excellent. As long as you crest at a certain speed, it'll maintain that speed going down the other side. So it makes it real easy, stress-free, and you don't have to ride the brakes nearly as much, at least with your foot on the pedal. Another big help are the numerous off-road cameras, including my favorite, the forward-looking camera, which takes any guesswork out when you're cresting a steep hill and you don't know what's on the other side. Overall, you'll definitely be able to access more campgrounds and trails than you would in a normal SUV. And it'd be an interesting comparison to Mazda's CX-50, which also has its own off-road trim level. In my experience, they're probably going to be about even. Now, one area where the Mazda might come up short is ground clearance, since Subarus are known for having just a little bit of an advantage there. Much like the exterior, the 4-star Hybrid's interior is pretty much identical to the non-hybrid version. You do have some specific gauges here for the hybrid system to show where the power is being transferred back and forth, but otherwise, they're very, very similar. In the supporting trims, you get non-animal seat upholstery, which is good if you're looking to save the planet. In the top trim, however, most people want something a little more refined, so you can get real, genuine leather. The dashboard itself is fairly attractive, and I like these hexagonal patterns that they've embossed into it. You get this huge 11.6-inch infotainment display that's vertical and really shows a lot of what you need at a quick glance. One thing I also like is the on-screen buttons are big, so as you're driving down the road, you don't have to feel like you have to hunt and peck for them. You just kind of take a quick glance and pop it. Underneath we have a standard wireless phone charger, but the plastic here isn't quite as grippy as I'd prefer. As we're driving on some of the curvy roads, the phone was sliding back and forth a bit. On the steering wheel, we have a plethora of buttons. So many buttons that I would think this was a Porsche from 10 years ago. But fortunately, they're all organized logically, and you really don't have to look down to touch them once you get acclimated to the system. Pairing nicely with this massive infotainment screen is a first ever for the Forester, a digital instrument panel. You have 3 different distinct themes that you can use, including one where you can slave the map from your iPhone, whether it's Apple Maps or Google Maps or even Waze. The seats themselves are well shaped, and over several hours of driving, I remain really nice and comfortable. Adding to that, in this top touring trim, you get heated and cooled seats, and a lovely little heated steering wheel too. As far as personal storage goes, you have this tray again for the phone charger, but you also have moderately sized cup holders here. The door pockets, well, they're not quite as generous as some other SUVs, but you should be able to get some of those moderately sized hiking flasks to fit without any problem. Here in the back seat, I have an ample amount of space. I'm 5'10", sitting behind the driver's seat that's set for me. As you can see, I'm not wanting for more legroom or footroom. Everything just kind of fits nicely, and I have just a couple extra inches above my head. Back here, materials quality isn't quite as nice as the front, which is typical and helpful when you have kids or dogs back here, because that hard plastic is going to end up being way more durable over time. Here in the center, we have an armrest that folds down with 2 moderately sized cup holders, and when you need to charge, you have a USB-C port and a USB-A port, and they're flanked by the seat heater controls, which are only for the outboard seats. Another nice feature back here is you have plenty of pockets, including one that seems perfect for your cell phone. Now these seats also recline just a little bit, so that'll make a longer road trip that much more pleasant. Adding to the convenience is an available hands-free power liftgate. and that opens up to 27.5 cubic feet of cargo space, which as you can see is pretty accommodating. At least in this top trim model, we have these remote seatback releases that really simplify loading longer and bulkier objects. And that's helped by a flat load floor. So you're not gonna have to shimmy or load things in multiple stages. One good thing about this hybrid is the batteries don't encroach into any of the cargo space. So you're gonna get the same amount of space here as you would with a non-hybrid model. Prices for the Forester Hybrid start right around $37,000, which is about $2,000 more than the non-hybrid. In the all-important fuel economy numbers, this is rated at 34 mpg on the highway, 35 mpg in the city, and 35 mpg combined. Compare that with the non-hybrid's 26 mpg and 29 highway mpg, well, you can see that it's gonna pay some dividends. The thing is though, over the course of the year, let's say driving 15,000 miles and with gas at around $4 a gallon, you're only going to be saving about $300 per year in fuel costs. That means it'll take just around 7.5 years to recoup the cost for the hybrid premium. On the plus side, you do get just a little bit more power. As impressive as those figures are, they come up short against the likes of the Honda CR-V hybrid, which is rated at 40 mpg, as well as the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, which is rated at 39 mpg. It's obvious that the Forester gains that advantage for its all-terrain prowess, but it's not the only choice. Mazda's CX-50 has its own specific trim that does some moderate off-roading too. Other possible alternatives include the Ford Bronco Sport, as well as the Nissan Rogue Rock Creek. Those are all great choices if you need to do some off-roading, so what would you pick? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons to get us in the next review.